Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the St. Petersburg because a very important meeting took place on the territory of the St. Petersburg yesterday in the evening. In this video we can see the moment when the special representative of the United States of America, Steve Witkoff, met with the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. As you can see, the relations are very good, they are very happy, and after this meeting they began the talks. According to information we have, the topic of the meeting between Putin and Witkoff was aspects of the Ukrainian settlement. That was stated by Kremlin. Later, after the meeting ended, these talks took around 5 hours. The presidential special envoy Steve Witkoff left St. Petersburg after nearly 5 hours of negotiations with Vladimir Putin. And right after he left the Russian Federation, we start receiving lots of very interesting and very important insights, and I would like to discuss them in details. So we have two special representatives. We have Steve Witkoff and we have General Keith Kellogg, and they have completely different opinions regarding the settlement of the conflict in Ukraine. So let's discuss in details. Trump's envoy's embrace of Russian demands worries Republicans. Recognizing of the status of new Russian territories is the fastest way to end the Ukrainian conflict. That was stated by Steve Witkoff, by the person who had meeting with the Russian president yesterday. The American diplomat personally told Trump about this after meeting with Putin's special representative Dmitriev. At the same meeting with Trump, General Keith Kellogg, this is the second special representative, the US President's special representative to Ukraine, spoke out against Witkoff's idea. The meeting ended without Trump making a specific decision on a new US strategy. And later, Keith Kellogg provided his own plan and his own vision regarding the settlement of the conflict in Ukraine. And this is basically his plan. According to him, Ukraine could be divided like post-war Berlin. Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. The United Kingdom and France could lead the western zone of control, the special representative noted. Trump's special envoy also clarified that Europe should not count on US military support if it is not ready to act. So if you take a look at this map, we're going to see at least 4 sectors. The western part of Ukraine will be under control of British, French and Ukrainian forces. The central, more precisely the eastern and the northeastern, will be under control of Ukrainian forces, and Russia will keep territories under their control. And the fourth zone is the demilitarized zone between the Ukrainian positions and the positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Obviously, Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation will never accept the plan of General Keith Kellogg, but anyway, this is a very interesting idea. At the same time, we continue receiving, or we start receiving reports from Ukraine that they're not going to sign any settlement, any peace agreement with anybody. Zelensky, for example, today stated that the war must end at the negotiation table. That was he stated, but later we got several clarifications from at least the only person that the Russians recognized as legal power. We are talking about the Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada, Ruslan Stefanchuk. And he named the conditions for holding elections in Ukraine. The Verkhovna Rada will once again support both the continuation of martial law and the continuation of mobilization in Ukraine, because I say again, the war is not over, the war continues. So the state must take care of the national security. So according to the only person that Russia recognized as a legal power, there's going to be no peace in Ukraine, the war will continue. Furthermore, today we got reports that from different deputy of the Verkhovna Rada that Ukrainian parliament is going to extend martial law and mobilization on April 16-18th, and these are very interesting dates, by the way. It will be in effect until August 6th, says Yaroslav Zhelenchuk. The martial law is currently in effect until May 9th. Its cancellation would have the way for announcing elections, which Zelensky categorically doesn't want to hold. So once again, as you can see, the Verkhovna Rada is going to extend martial law, and and mobilization on April 16th and 18th. And these are exactly the dates when, according to, let's say, agreement between the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, and Donald Trump, the ceasefire on energy facilities ends, at least from the Russian side. Furthermore, I'll remind you, and this is also very important, that yesterday, during the Ramstein meeting, the Western countries promised Ukraine the biggest, probably military package, let's cost to 21 billion euros. Obviously, the biggest one, and according to information we have, the Western countries will provide Ukraine a lot of missiles for air defense systems like Iris-T and Patriot. So basically, and as it was discussed and as it was projected by the Russians and Vladimir Putin, Ukraine used this 30-day ceasefire to rearm itself and to prolong the martial law and the mobilization. And that's it. As you can see, during the, let's say, first, 20 days of this ceasefire, the Western countries didn't give Ukraine even a single dollar. But at the end of the situation, they promised Ukraine the significant number of weapons and arms. And now we see the Ukrainians are planning to prolong the martial law. And now we see that Ukrainians use the situation just to rearm itself and to prepare itself before further war with the Russian Federation. Anyway, let's wait and see, of course, what is going to be next. But today we got another very important piece of news that the Russian Federation is probably preparing an offensive against the Chernigov region as well as the Kharkiv and Sumy regions. RBC Ukraine sources note that the armed forces of Ukraine are transferring additional troops there for defense. So basically, this also fits the plan of Case Kellogg. According to him, Ukrainians, the main part of Ukraine would be to establish control and to, let's say, to defend the eastern and the northeastern part of Ukraine. So the territory between the Chernigov region and Dnipro and Zaporozhye region. So everything that is located on, let's say, on the, eastern bank of the river of Dnipro, because the western bank of the river of Dnipro would be under protection and control of the coalition of willing and in charge of UK and French forces. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously and very likely the entire military campaign of 2025 and probably of 2026 will be completely concentrated in this block between the city of Chernigov and, let's say, the city of Pokrovsk or something like this. Now let's go to the line of combat contact. We have lots of very interesting updates. And first let's talk about the Sumy direction. According to several pro-Russian resources, as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to establish control over at least 50% of the village of Oleshnya. There are still very heavy clashes, and probably this is the longest battle when talking about village in the vicinity of Sudzha. The Russians started assault operation on the village of Oleshnya probably a week ago, but they still haven't managed to finish this battle. The Ukrainians still have possibilities to bring forces, and this is exactly what they are doing right now. As for the village of Gornal, we haven't received anything regarding the situation. According to the latest update we have, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly and to get as close as possible to the settlement. This information was provided us by pro-Russian resources, but as for now, we haven't received anything whether the Russians moved further on in the territory of the village or not. As for the Belgorod direction, as you can see during the previous 24 hours, during the previous night more precisely, we haven't received anything special, just several FPV drone attacks on both the Russians and the Ukrainian positions. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Kupiansk area. During the previous night we had several updates. The most important one is that the Russians, after a very long operational pause, improved their positions in the central part of the village by the name of Kamenka. So there was a very long operational pause, but now we understand that that wasn't any operational pause. The thing is that according to information we have, the Ukrainians have redeployed in this area the units and the forces of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade, and most likely that was the reason why the Russians were forced to slow down. Anyway, most likely after the Russians managed to deal significant damage to this brigade, the Russians continue advancing. And today we have the first changes on the map according to different sources. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Chasiv Yar and the Toretsk direction. According to information we have, during the previous night, lots of things happened there. First, let's talk about the city of Chasiv Yar. According to information we have, during the previous 12 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions once again in the central part, in the city of Chasiv Yar, in the citadel of the city of Chasiv Yar. The Russian offensive operation in this area started several days ago, more precisely on the 10th of April of 2025. By the end of the 11th of April, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the vicinity of Stadium. And today, according to information we have, by the morning of the 12th of April, the Russians managed to secure several positions in the northern and the northeastern part of the citadel. The Russians continue offensive, and we see that Ukrainians has less and less positions under their control. At the same time, the Russian sources published this very interesting video. In this video, we can see how the Russian drone attacked Ukrainian positions in these, let's say, trenches, in this dense network of the fortifications. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that this, let's say, stronghold is under complete Ukrainian control. And based on this video, we have adjusted the map back in Ukrainian favor. The same thing we can see on different mappers. So the Ukrainians most likely, during the previous days, carried out successful counterattack that allowed them to restore control over this road and over this complex network of the fortifications. So, and this counterattack allowed the Ukrainians to maintain the corridor for evacuation of Ukrainians of the 24th Mechanized Brigade that are currently blocked by the Russians on the territory of the citadel. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in the vicinity of the city of Toretsk. I'll remind you that 3 days ago, the Russians launched their offensive operation from the city of Toretsk in the northern direction. And as a result of this attack, the Russians took under control the village of Nilipovka and several strongholds around the settlement. And today, this information was also confirmed by different very, very reliable pro-Russian resources. As for now, we don't have enough of proofs to color the entire territory. We still believe that there are still very heavy clashes between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and obviously the Ukrainians are not counting losses, but with the purpose to restore control over these lost territories. So as for now, we're going to keep everything as is, but we believe that during the upcoming day, we're going to receive additional updates, and then we will be able to make several conclusions, and we will make the final decision regarding this territory. The most important updates, and probably the biggest number of updates, are coming from the southern part of Kliban-Bytska Reservoir. As you can see, we have a lot of icons and we have a lot of flags. The Russians improved their position significantly during the previous 24 hours. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 11th of April of 2025, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 12th of April of 2025. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, deterioration of the situation in the Panteleimoniivka area. In recent days, the Russian armed forces have begun actively advancing, occupying first Panteleimoniivka and then Alexandropol. The pressure occurred gradually with increased intensity, and unfortunately, the Russian armed forces found weak spots in the defense. So the Ukrainians are saying that the Russians launched a major offensive operation in this area with the purpose to establish complete control over the territory between the settlement of Zelene Polye, Gnatovka, and Sukhaya Balka. So this pocket is the task that the Russians wants to establish control over in the very near future. Basically, they will cut this salient as soon as possible. Furthermore, let's discuss in details, and first let's talk about the settlement of Kalynove. Today, both the neutral resources and pro-Ukrainian resources reported that as a result of breakthrough, the Russians managed to establish control for over more than 70% of the village of Kalynove. The Ukrainians still control most likely the most western part of the settlement and the northeastern part, but as I understand, it's just a matter of time when they receive first geolocations from this territory. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions along N20 roads, so these are the changes on the ground. The Russians managed to secure these, let's say, positions and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions between Zelene Polye and Kalynove itself by taking under control several fields, tree lines in this direction as well. So now we see that the Russians are trying to attack in the direction of Gnatovka using at least 3 roads of attacks: the western road, the central road, and of course the eastern roads of attack. At the same time, the Russians established complete control with FPV drones over the main supply lines, destroying Ukrainian logistic and destroying Ukrainian communication between different, let's say, directions and front lines. So we see that the situation for the Ukrainians is very critical. At the same time, we can see huge activity of Russian drones in the northern part of the village by the name of Tarasovka. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to discover and to destroy the significant number of vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, tanks, equipment of the armored forces of Ukraine, and to destroy it. So we see that the battle for the settlement of Tarasovka is also coming to an end. So we see that this direction is at the verge of the breakthrough, and if Ukrainians lose this pocket, lose this salient, the Russians will face no barriers to attack the city of Konstantinovka from the south, where, according to our understanding, the general battle is going to start. Now let's talk about the Novopavlovka direction or the Dnipro direction, where the Russians during the previous 24 hours also managed to improve their positions. I'll remind you that yesterday the Russians launched another major offensive operation, and this information was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources. In this video we can see how the units of marine brigades, different battalions of the armored forces of Ukraine were trying to repel a huge Russian attack, major Russian attack in this direction. And based on the yesterday's video, we have adjusted the map, and so this is the situation by the end of the 10th of April. By the end of the day when we got the video, we adjusted the map like this, but by the morning of the 12th of April, several mappers improved Russian positions significantly. Furthermore, the Russians, according to information we have, managed to answer the village of Toretsk. So as you can see, the Russians are getting closer and closer to the border with the Dnipro region, and the Russians are about to take under control the settlement of Bogdanovka. Summarizing everything, the Russians during the previous days were attacking something like this, and they managed to get significant results. So we see that the battle for this territory is coming also to an end. As for the South Donetsk direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians also managed to improve their positions by taking significant territories under complete control to the south of the village of Bogatyr. So we see that the Russians through the fields are trying to advance in the direction of the village of Odradne and in the direction of the village by the name of Bogatyr. So the Russians are moving, and we see that Ukrainians can't stabilize the situation. And maybe this is one of the main reasons why the Western countries try to intensify the negotiation process, because they want to finish the conflict, they want to settle the conflict before Ukrainian lines collapse completely. As for the Shevchenko direction, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly and to collect the critical mass around the settlement of Shevchenko. We expect that during the next 72 hours, the Russians will try to answer the village itself and to establish complete control over the eastern part of the settlement. So the battle for this area is about to start as well. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.